Welcome to episode 6 of RocketPod, the podcast for business and charity professionals looking to expand their CRM knowledge. You're listening to me, Natalie Silver, and Rocket CRM directors Ian Wicks and Kyle McKee as we talk about Dynamics 365 and Power Apps. Dynamics 365 is a leader in CRM technology. Developed by Microsoft, it has a reputation for being highly flexible and a scalable CRM solution. But did you know that Power Apps is a very similar product produced by Microsoft that also offers organizations a highly flexible and scalable CRM? But what's the difference, and why would you choose one over the other? We answer these questions and discuss the wider Power Platform ecosystem in this jam-packed episode. If you appreciate our conversations, click the like button and subscribe.
So hey guys, hello, thanks for joining me today. We've come together again to have a little bit of a chit chat about CRM. But today, specifically, we're going to cover the topics of Microsoft Dynamics 365 and Power Apps and the Power Platform, which both are built on. We keep hearing about Microsoft Dynamics 365, but also about Power Apps and how they both can provide SMEs, larger organizations, and even startups with a really scalable and flexible CRM solution. I think we need to really clear up some confusion around the two because things seem a little bit vague, even out there in the ether. When you go out there to see what other people are saying, it just feels a little bit vague. Maybe it's a little bit overcomplicated, but really it isn't. So that's what I wanted you guys to cover today, really.
Yeah, that's no problem. If you search anything CRM nowadays, it's difficult not to have heard of Dynamics 365 or Microsoft Dynamics 365. Microsoft CRM, because everybody knows that Microsoft's big in the world of CRM. But to answer your question, and it's a good question, to answer it, I'm going to go back in time. I'm going to give you a little CRM history lesson. So let's go back, way back to the 1980s. So to the world of the yuppies. I don't know if you remember yuppies with the suit and the massive, great big mobile phone the size of a brick. What else, apart from a mobile phone, the yuppies had was a Filofax. I don't know if you remember Filofaxes. It was like a personal organizer where you keep all your contacts and your addresses, and your calendar also existed in there as well, along with memos and notes. So that was kind of like CRM in your pocket. Brilliant, eh? But what were some of the problems with that, might you think?
Well, you could lose it.
You lose
That's the first one. You lose it, you lose everything. Yeah, you drop it in the toilet, or if you're, having a pint of lager by the river, accidentally drop it in there. Actually, sharing the information was a lot harder too. You got a big old Filofax with 25 people's details. Sharing that over to someone else, it's a lot more effort. And then over time, it's paper based, so you'll end up getting it gets all dog-eared, tatty, scratched, like hanging on a thread kind of scenario, and then you've got to write everything down again in a new one. Yeah,
exactly. And that was the whole problem with that. So what came after that? There was a thing called a PDA that came after that. PDA, Personal Digital Assistant. So basically it was like a tiny tablet. And this is kind of like now moving into the digital age. So people started carrying electronic devices around in the 1990s with all the same information that they previously had on their Filofaxes, with a little grayscale screen, and it was often accompanied with a little stylus as well that you could slide into the side of the PDA. They did come in lots of different shapes and sizes. I remember I had one. It was called a Scion. I don't know if you remember Scions, Kyle.
No, a bit before my time, but yes. So I'll point that out to you.
Same problems, I guess, right?
Yeah, you could lose it. You could drop it. You could break. It gets out of date. Now you've got the problem with only one of the other issues that you've got over a Filofax is that you've now got the fact that technology gets old and you need a new one, but you still have the same problem of moving the data from one device to another.
I remember, when people bought a new PDA, it was like, how do I get the contacts off of this one onto that one? Oh, I've got to get a program from somewhere and install it on my PC. And oh my God, it was a nightmare. But around this time now, you had this new software was being developed called CRM, Customer Relationship Management. And a couple of the early ones were like Goldmine and ACT.
I've heard of ACT. In fact, it was one of the first CRMs that I'd used when I first started off in marketing back in the 90s. So.
Yeah, I think Carl's used ACT. I don't have a lot of experience with ACT. I used to work with Goldmine a lot, and it was one of the very first CRMs. It was revolutionary at the time. You had contact management, you had email, calendar opportunities, and customer service cases all in one system. And it was shared data as long as you were all in the same office, because you had to set up a installation on a server. And if you wanted to install it in different locations, different cities, you had to set up a very error-prone synchronization model. But you had things like company pipeline. You had all your customer service tickets. It was easy to update, and it was simple to install, relatively simple to install.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, it's quite funny that all this stuff was available in the 90s, which seems so long ago. I mean, Goldmine itself was a product that was extremely popular well into the 2000s. In fact, into the 2010s, the early part of the 2010s, really. Yeah, they grew massively.
Although they're still around, I think.
Are they okay? Yeah, they're still around, but not to the same scale as what they were back in the day. It was good at what it did, Goldmine, I'm referring to here, as long as what you wanted fell into its kind of pre-built stereotypical functionality. But the problem sometimes you have is that everyone has slightly different requirements. So their processes were all slightly different. There was also issues with data or table structure. So Goldmine in particular, they shoehorned a lot of different things into a single table as an example, which became very difficult to manage to actually report on. It just wasn't flexible. It just wasn't flexible enough. And then, of course, you've got what is now what you would consider a modern problem, which wasn't a problem in the 90s and the early 2000s, which was that you still had to install it somewhere. It had to exist on a thing for you to use it.
Yeah.
There were no such thing as online systems back then. Websites were very, very simple.
Yeah, gosh. It seems weird now, doesn't it?
Very weird. I can't say, I'll be honest, I can't say I'm unhappy about the fact that we don't have to go around installing software on machines anymore. No.
So, Kyle, when did Microsoft start to get involved then? I mean, when did it come on the scene?
I don't know the exact date because I'd be lying if I gave you one, but it was in the 2000s.
Early 2000s, yeah.
They wanted to get a piece of the pie. They could obviously see that there was a market there for business applications, especially specifically CRM and ERP solutions. And they wanted to get in. And there were rumors around for a long time, apparently, that they were going to create a CRM system that was going to blow everyone out of the water, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, the reality is when they did implement CRM, the first few versions weren't great. They had a scenario that they had to iteratively improve on the product over time. And I think a lot of the other CRM solutions out at the time were quite happy that it took Microsoft a few versions to kind of get to that level. But when you've got the resource that Microsoft have, and if they were determined to do it, they'll eventually get it right. It obviously took time, and it was in the old software model where stuff would take 2 to 3 years to 4 years even before you get a new version. Goldmine, Sage, Maximizer, Act, etc. All those CRM companies all carried on ticking along nicely because they had a good install base. They had a good set of users that had no intention of moving.
And then suddenly, boom, Microsoft Dynamics CRM version 4, the eagle has landed. They actually produced something that was a pretty compelling product. That was the first one that I think you used, Kyle, right? That was the first one I used as well.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, the first one I used. I mean, the way they redesigned it is the fact they redesigned it in a way that it could be hosted. You could actually have multi-tenants on the same environment, which I believe, not that I work with version 3, but I believe wasn't possible. So obviously they had one eye on the future, even at that early stage. And I think it came out in 2008.
I thought it was earlier than that. Yeah, you had things like multi-language, multi-currency, multiple tenancies. Yeah. So they actually, because it was a compelling product and configurable, they did start to at last win some business and start sort of taking over a little bit in the CRM world. Then you had Microsoft Dynamics 2011 came out. So after CRM 4 was 2011, and this was the first proper online cloud product. And I think it was the first one to introduce solutions as well.
Well, actually, they did actually release version 4 in the cloud in the US only. My thought on that was it was probably a test case. They were seeing what the uptake was like and laying the groundwork for the full release of 2011 worldwide.
Carl, would you mind just explaining for people who don't know what a solution is?
Sure. Basically, a package, essentially just a package of things. It allowed third-party companies, so an example would be something like Click Dimensions, to create a solution on top of Dynamics as a platform. So you could basically package up a load of things together and then have them installed across multiple systems, a bit like how you would install a program or an application on your phone or anything like that.
Very good. CRM 2011 was also the first one with dashboards and charts, unless you're going to correct me.
No correction here.
Good. And then what came after 2011? 2013, didn't it?
Yeah. I mean, that was a big change for them. That was they realized the UI needed to change. One of the big issues that a lot of people had with 2011 is it used a ribbon interface for all the menus, which caused a lot of confusion because there were lots of options for people to click on at any one time. So one of their key things that they changed with 2013 was reducing the number of buttons for people to click on when they open a record, for example, because it was too complicated. It was very powerful, but it created a barrier for brand new users who weren't very confident. I mean, they changed a lot of stuff. They created the concept of quick create forms and quick view forms. So small, simple forms that can pop out and essentially allow you to create a record, or pieces of information that you can show on a form that show data from somewhere else in the system. They were pretty powerful things.
Cool. And then they had a change of name. In 2016, they decided to move away from naming it after the years.
No, they didn't.
Are you sure?
It was still Dynamics CRM 2016.
So when did Dynamics 365 come out then?
After 2016.
I guess, yeah. And they called it Dynamics 365, right? I remember there was definitely a clear move to move away from the term CRM.
They changed it from CRM, yes, to customer engagement, but that change was probably about 2017, I think. But they did release 2016 first. By the way, just as a side note, I know we're not specifically referring to it, but all of these versions where they'd moved the product online, they still had on-premise versions available. And during these times, up until about now, when you got to Dynamics 365, the products were aligned. They had exactly the same feature set across both sets of products. And I wouldn't say Microsoft were agnostic at that stage, but they didn't really mind if you went on-prem or online. But when the move to 365 happened and they merged it into the Office 365 tenancy or Microsoft 365 tenancy and platform, etc., all that sort of stuff, they then started adding more and more features to online that just weren't available on-premise.
Do you know what's interesting, guys? Just an observation that Dynamics quite like changing the names, which is crazy because from a marketing perspective, consistency is key. And also the fact that they removed CRM was a poor move. Just for anybody from a search engine optimization perspective, Microsoft CRM, people actually still search that.
Yeah, absolutely. They still do. No, I totally agree. Yeah. I always put it down to marketing people just doing marketing stuff to get bored and making changes for the sake of it.
Oh, it's flipping marketers. Sorry, any marketers listening to this currently.
That's a joke. That was a joke. That was a joke, by the way. That was a joke. I don't know who decided to make the change. Please don't get in contact and sue us.
So Dynamics 365 is essentially Dynamics CRM with a different name, and it all sits on this common area, the Power Platform. Is that right?
Kind of. They added more features and functionality, and I think the reason why they split, just to speculate, and this is pure speculation, the reason why they split or got rid of the CRM tag is that they were going after creating more and more different types of products on this effectively common platform. So not just your traditional CRM elements. I guess maybe it's because they may have said that CRM traditionally is a sales function, whereas it doesn't work that way these days because you've got customer service and whatever else. So maybe that's why they dropped the CRM tag.
Yeah, I think it would make sense. But if they were to do that, then, and if some of those elements, some elements of those products that they've created, say Dynamics 365 Talent by Dynamics 365 Business Central, they didn't sit within the CRM grouping, then they could have produced a different grouping of products that would have made more sense. Maybe, yeah. I don't know. Now, I'm just speculating.
Confusion lies around all of this. So there's a common assumption that Dynamics 365 Sales, Dynamics 365 Marketing, Dynamics 365 Talent, and Dynamics 365 Business Central, because it's all prefixed with Dynamics 365, it all is on the same database, right? No, it does not. Only some of them exist on Power Platform, some don't. So you still have to do integrations between some of the products.
Linking the systems together isn't always as easy as people think it might be.
Was Microsoft like you to believe? Well, I think the basic concept, though, I guess, if you're trying to understand the difference between Power Platform or Power Apps and Dynamics 365, basic concept to get your head around is the fact that the Power Platform is the underlying platform that we as VARs in Microsoft language, as partners, we can also build stuff on. Dynamics or Microsoft have created their own apps. They've now split it from the platform, the sales app, the marketing app, the customer service, field service, project service. They all are apps that Microsoft have that also could be installed on top of that platform. So that's the key difference. Anything prefixed with Dynamics is Microsoft's app that lives on the Power Platform, whereas the Power Platform itself is a platform that allows partners to build things on, partners and clients, customers, to build things on as well.
Right, that's really clear, Kyle. But quick question. So these apps, these products that they've created, they are essentially, they can be out of the box, but they're highly configurable, correct? Just for clarity for the audience,
right.
Because they'll be wondering, is Dynamics 365 a truly custom built solution, or is it comparable with an out the box solution? I think that's what people want to know.
It's both. Sorry to sit on the fence a little bit there. It's both. You can actually buy Dynamics 365 Sales as an example. You'll have an app installed for sales. You can go into, it's called Sales Hub. You can go into there and you can start using it. But 99% of the time, when people install those apps, they need to be tweaked. They need to be customized. They need to have their processes mapped in. So it is completely configurable. We can add things to it, enhance those apps and the bits of functionality that are there. Equally, you can have the opposite, which is I have a very, very simple requirement. I don't need a full Dynamics app. I just need a couple of fields and a couple of tables to store information, in which we can build that straight on the Power Platform. We don't need to install the Dynamics apps to do that.
Got you. That's very clear. Thank you.
That's nearly all about Dynamics. But before we come on to Power Apps, let's talk about the underlying platform for those first-party apps. Those first-party apps, i.e. Microsoft applications, are all built on something called the Microsoft Dataverse, which previously was called the Common Data Service, but that's another story.
Can somebody just give a little bit more information to those who don't know what that is?
To dumb it down a little bit, just think of it as a database. It's just a database that's online that allows you to create tables and create columns and be able to present the data in the specific way. That's effectively what the Dataverse is.
I think we've got a nice graphic somewhere that explains this. So I'll pop the link at the bottom of the podcast so that people can check that out. Sorry, Kyle, carry on.
No, you're fine. So, I mean, obviously you've got the basics of, you've got tables that can be related. So you can have a relational database essentially that you can create, but there's other bits to it too. Things like the forms, to what you see when you load up a page to create a new company record or a contact record or something. You can have the forms, you can have views. There's functionality built in there to cater for certain elements of business logic. You can create some fairly basic charts and interactive dashboards. You can have, there's a security model inside there, so you can restrict access to data. And that's kind of all contained in the Dataverse. But essentially, it's just to dumb it down, it's a database that's in the cloud.
Ian, have you got anything to add to that on the Dataverse or Microsoft's approach to it?
Well, basically, so that's the Dataverse, as Carl said, that's the database. All the first-party apps are just a collection of pre-built tables, charts, dashboards, all the things that Carl's just mentioned, all that functionality, all built, pre-packaged. That's all baked into one application, all sitting on that Dataverse platform. The idea is you can just turn on the app that you want, whether you want sales or whether you want customer service, or if you want marketing through a subscription, through a license, and then you can just start to use it straight away after you've had a bit of training. One of the downsides is that the first-party apps are a bit more expensive than other potential options. But I mean, you're going to weigh that up when you work with a partner, because the fact is you can rapidly deploy those first-party applications rather than engaging somebody to build something out for you. So one of the good things about these apps is, as Carl said, because they're built on the Microsoft Dataverse platform, you can actually enhance. So you can sign up for a license for Dynamics 365 Sales, for example, but then you can actually enhance them and add your own tables, your own fields and charts to complement what's already there.
I see. Right. Okay. So if that's Dynamics 365, can we move to Power Apps? Because that's a very similar proposition and solution, isn't it? Can you explain that to the audience?
Yeah, so I mean, what I mentioned earlier is effectively Microsoft now gives us as partners access to that platform. So we can create our own apps, we can create our own tables and fields and forms to effectively solve any kind of business problem that we need to. We've got the functionality to create business rules or business logic inside the system, and we can effectively make it look similar to the Microsoft applications. Obviously, we're not talking about creating the exact same functionality, but the look and the feel is the same. So the structure of how they work is the same.
Yeah, and the other thing to think about as well is when we're designing these apps nowadays, model-driven apps, you don't have to think too much about creating a special version for tablets or for mobile phones, because a model-driven app can be used on pretty much any device without any tweaking. So you could design it once and then you kind of use it everywhere.
That's very clever. So I guess that's a bit like when you go to a web design agency and it's a mobile responsive, it's adaptive technology. So we don't have to worry about things looking or feeling odd on different devices that we're using. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
The advice
absolutely.
on it.
Absolutely.
That's really good.
Yeah.
Oh, excellent. So in essence, what you've both said there is that the Dynamics 365 first-party apps, they're nothing more than model-driven apps themselves. Is that right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Natalie. I mean, it can be as simple as just a couple of basic tables, or it can be super complex. You can have a transactional level system with thousands of tables or thousands of rows, inquiries, policies, quotes, whatever it is that you need in there with files linked through SharePoint, etc. All of that all falls under a sort of model-driven app.
I see. Right. Okay. Both of them have got their merits. They're very similar in many ways. They're both built on the same platform. In which case, why would we create our own model-driven Power App instead of using the one that Microsoft has already created, say Dynamics 365 Sales?
Well, there's a couple of reasons, but often it might be a money-based decision. So, for example, licenses for Power Apps are a lot cheaper than the licenses for the first-party apps. And there are, of course, with Microsoft being Microsoft, a ton of different license types to sort through. So one of the interesting things is that pretty much all the Dynamics licensing, or it always has been up until now, they are starting to change some of that, has been based on trust. So there are certain tables and certain things that are only available to certain licenses. And because it's trust-based, you could absolutely be non-compliant with your licensing and you're not even aware of it. So that's where you gain the benefit of working with an experienced partner like Rocket CRM, for example, because we know how the licensing model works, what is allowed, what isn't allowed, and we can advise what are the best licenses for your particular scenario.
So basically, you're saying that you can stop people from overpaying if they might be dead set on going down the Dynamics 365 sales route. But you're saying, actually, if you go through the Power Apps route, you can have almost the identical product, but for a fraction of the cost.
Well, yeah, we've actually helped a lot of customers in that exact way, actually. We've come across a few customers where we've done a license review with them as a kind of like an introductory service, and they're paying for an expensive license. It has a whole lot of functionality that they really don't need, that they could literally just split out into a simple Power Apps license and pay less than a quarter of the licensing. So yeah, absolutely, we can help people save money that way.
Do you think many people realise that?
No.
They do when we tell them.
yeah, once we tell them, once we have a conversation with them, yes. But no, I think a lot of people think, okay, this is being used, to use an example, this is being used by our sales team, so we need a sales enterprise license. But they might only need very, very, very basic functionality and don't need all the bells and whistles with AI and all that kind of stuff that Microsoft have. In which case you could save, depending on what licenses you use, you could pay literally a tenth of the price. But you can also mix and match if you need to. Mm-hmm. Another reason that you may want to create your own one, I mean, I alluded to it earlier, was just the ability to create completely bespoke requirements that don't fit into a boxed solution. So an example in the Dynamics world would be memberships. Currently, out of the box, none of the Dynamics apps has the ability to manage memberships and renewals and benefits and, handle their previous year's memberships, etc. But that's an example of something that we've built before for a client requirement using a model-driven app. We've created all sorts of things in the past. Dogs, litters. I'm talking about tables here, not physical. Dogs, litters. Dogs, litters, racehorses.
Yeah.
Lots and lots of other, cars, all that kind of thing.
I see. So very flexible and very applicable to different industries with different requirements, because often that becomes the problem, isn't it? When somebody is searching for a CRM solution, but a lot of the out-of-the-box offerings just don't have that flexibility and the adaptability that they need for their exact requirements.
Before you carry on, sorry, Natalie, I mean, this is why it's important to engage a partner, because a partner understands the Dynamics licensing. We've had plenty of examples where people are saving thousands of pounds a year based on advice that we've given them.
Yeah, so basically, in broad terms, people can go down the cheap and out-the-box solution, or they can go down the consultant / choosing a partner route. And you would often think the latter would be a lot more expensive. But really what you're saying is in the long run, it can be more cost effective to get something that's going to be much more fit for purpose and save you money and have a solution that's going to help grow your business and not restrict it.
It's always beneficial to work with the partner when it comes to Dynamics. As a customer, you've got your job to do. Get somebody in to do, an expert in to help you with your CRM. You're always going to end up with a better product rather than trying to do it yourself. And it's worth pointing out that within an organization, you're quite likely to have different users with different needs. So as Kyle said, we can mix and match the licenses for people as well. So it might be that the sales department needs to access all the functionality, but someone else in the accounts, as Kyle also said, might just want a very small model-driven app that is built on the same data environment that just gives them access to orders, or somebody might just need names and addresses of customers.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Even from a GDPR point of view, in certain industries, we have a lot of charity sector clients, right? Some of that information is going to be very, very sensitive. So there's some that you're going to need to completely remove from the frontline fundraising staff, for example, where it becomes quite risky to have that information available to everyone across the board. But also, like you've just said, some of those roles within the organisation just don't warrant or merit access to that information. It'll just cloud the waters and make it more complex for the person who's using that database.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of got your two use cases, don't you? You have the security aspect. The best practice is always you should only have access to what you need to do your job. That's the first part. And then the second part there is just overwhelming users. Users can get overwhelmed with seeing 50 different options in front of them when they only need to click on one. And that's one of the things we always cover. So that's one of the key components when we implement new features and functionality or new products. It's about understanding so that we get an understanding so that the app we design just provides what you need. It's not necessarily going to overwhelm you, just to protect the users a little bit in the beginning.
I see. Okay. So I've also come across the term Canvas app. How is that different from a model-driven app?
I'll try and explain that one. Carl will probably butt in and say I'm wrong. But there is a different kind of Power App called a Canvas app. But when we talk about Power Apps at Rocket CRM, we're generally speaking about model-driven apps because that's what we deal with on a day-to-day basis. A model-driven app, looking like your CRM with a menu, several tables. It could be used for multiple purposes. A Canvas app is not a collection of tables. A Canvas app usually addresses one problem or one kind of functional use. So if you imagine a site inspector has to go on site and look at a broken fridge, for example, and then that person has to go and take a picture of the damage and upload it to the main CRM system. So this inspector on his phone might want to have a Canvas app that allows him to look up a customer, look up the equipment owned by that customer, identify the fridge, take a picture, press a submit button, and uploads the picture. I mean, that's all that app does. So it's like one functional use, one scenario.
It's not too bad, actually. The only thing I would add to that is it's not. So model-driven apps are tied to the Dataverse, meaning they present data that's in your Dataverse. Canvas apps don't need to be. They could be pulling data, displaying data, or doing things with a spreadsheet. They could be doing things with a SharePoint list. It doesn't have to be tied back to the Dataverse. That's the only thing I would add, but you are right.
Okay, guys, quick question. You've given the example of somebody going out to take a photo and upload it. So that's like an example of a service-based way that this could be applied. What are the other examples for those who might not be familiar with it? How else could you use the Canvas app?
All sorts. I mean, Microsoft's well-known example product, app in a day solution that you can do to get your hands on with how to build Canvas apps is to do with selecting a laptop. So literally going through a list of manufacturers and then selecting a laptop and then submitting the request to somebody to say, this is the laptop I want. It's literally endless.
And your model-driven app, on the other hand, is like for creating an end-to-end solution pretty much. So your customer database with all your customers on it, their interactions, their emails, phone calls, tends to be that total solution rather than a one-use application.
Okay, that's clear. Thanks, guys. We've spoken about the history of CRM, the history of Microsoft CRM, Dynamics 365, and the first-party apps. We've also touched on the Microsoft Dataverse and what that means. We've covered off model-driven apps and just now the Canvas apps.
Yeah, it's a lot.
So it is a lot. It is a lot for people to absorb and take in. But a lot of people are going to be saying still, what is the difference between Microsoft Dynamics 365 and Power Platform? What is Power Platform?
The Power Platform is just a name that's given to a grouping of four things. So those four things are 1, Power Apps, which we've already learned about. 2, Power Automate, which used to be called Flows. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. Power BI for reporting and data visualizations, and Power Virtual Agents. We focused in this episode on Dynamics 365 and Power Apps because that is the largest part of the Power Platform, and that's what we're involved with on a day-to-day basis. But it's worth having a quick explanation of the other three things I think that make up the Power Platform, because we do also use those as well as a way to evolve or enhance Power Apps.
I mean, Power Automate's the main one to start with. You can basically, I guess the clue's in the name, you can automate certain elements that you're doing, whether that's as simple as receiving an email, flagging it in your Outlook mailbox, And any attachments from that email that you've flagged get put into a specific folder in SharePoint that could do that. But also you can use it in conjunction with the database. Say somebody creates a new opportunity over a certain value. You can basically trigger a Power Automate to create a message in Teams that asks for authorization, whether they're good to send that quote out. And that could go to a very specific set of people. And then from there, they can authorize it or decline it, and you can have a workflow around it. So there's a lot of power around Power Automate. The key thing with Power Automate and a lot of these bits of functionality is don't over-engineer everything too soon and try and understand the key bits you want to do first.
Yeah, we do come across people that get carried away sometimes with Power Automate, don't they? And they get themselves in a mess. We're all about keeping things simple, so work out what the problem is and just do enough to solve the problem. If I take the next one, Power BI, I mean, Microsoft describe it as a business intelligence tool that helps users analyze and visualize data, create interactive reports, and share insights with others. So Power BI has got a report builder, and that allows us to create reports and those data visualizations, which can then be published by something called the Power BI report server. Our customers typically want to use Power BI reports once the standard Power Apps charts and dashboards have been stretched to the limit, or they want to add visualizations that aren't available, or if they want to connect their CRM data with data that's in another system and then just view it maybe in a single report. You can embed those Power BI reports into, or Power BI dashboards into your CRM, your model-driven app as well. So that's Power BI basically.
You've also got virtual agents, so you can create chatbots that you can deploy and effectively design the logic around those with no code. So effectively, if somebody says, when are your opening hours, or how long is it until I can return something, it can load up the answer for them without necessarily having to have a human to actually answer that question.
Right.
But from the client's perspective, it feels like a human.
Quick quiz question then for you, Natalie. See how much you can remember. What's the four components of the Power Platform?
You're putting me on the spot though. So it's Power Apps, Power Automate, Power BI, and Power Virtual Assistants or Agents. Sorry.
Agents.
Now on that Power Virtual Agents, that's quite.
Power Virtual Assistants. I quite like that idea.
I could do with one. That would be brilliant. So, on that last one though, it's very topical right now because everyone's talking about AI technology. Specifically in the areas that I work in, it's more to do with content generation and the application of AI there. But essentially, it's a very, very similar kind of way of applying the AI technology, isn't it? That's going to become more in focus, I think, as we progress through this year. And I know, looking at the last kind of announcements from Dynamics 365, they did actually put an emphasis on that kind of technology to assist and help with service-based applications. Do you think that's still, am I correct, basically?
Yeah, absolutely. Microsoft have really got a big focus on AI at the moment. They're already in certain parts. The Dynamics 365 marketing app, they're looking at adding functionality, AI functionality, where you can just throw in a few keywords and it will create content suggestions for you. You could almost, at the point where you can just tell it what you want, a subject, a few keywords, and who the audience are, and it'll write a blog post for you. So we're getting to those kind of levels nearly.
I've got my own views on that, but that's for a different podcast, maybe.
Just to add to that as well, there is additional components to the Power Platform that we haven't talked about. One of which is Power Pages.
Yeah, Power Pages. Yeah, absolutely. Power Pages is the portal side of things as well. So if you've got a CRM system, you've got, for example, a membership system, or you've got customers that want to check their customer service cases or what their tickets are with you, their orders even, you might want a portal. So a customer can log in, you'll give them a login through a password, and they'll log into your portal. They'll be able to see and update their details. They'll be able to look at all the stuff that's related to them. And depending upon their permissions, they'll be able to add things, take things away. It's more along the lines of that self-service application. If you're an organization and you want to be efficient, providing self-service opportunities for your customers will make you and your team more efficient because the customers are doing some of the work for you. So that's Power Pages in a nutshell.
Fantastic. That's great.
So, we recognize that actually there's a lot to take in. We've talked about a lot of things today, and we're happy to have a conversation with anybody about any of it. So if anybody's got any questions, please feel free to get in touch. We're happy to get on the phone and have a chat. If you've got any CRM requirements, questions, anything like that, or for a license review, if you want to talk about us, having a look at what licenses you're using and see if there's any money to be saved, quite happy to talk about that as well with you.
Okay, right, guys. I agree. And there's been a lot to take in. I think this is such a potentially complex subject, but actually you guys have done a really sound job in breaking it down and uncomplicating it. But I think this warrants maybe a couple more pieces of content, visual content that I will create and share and link to in this podcast. I think sometimes it helps people absorb the information a little bit easier as well. I think what we've done today is very clearly cover off what this whole Power Platform is and where Dynamics 365 and where Power Apps sit on there and how and why you would choose one or the other. Thank you very much for your very technical information. It's massively helpful. And I know that a lot of this audience, it'll be very new to them as well. So this is invaluable, actually. And as Ian's just said, if people have still got questions, they're still a little bit confused, if they're wondering if they can be saving money on their licenses, absolutely do get in touch with Ian or Kyle or any of the team at Rocket, and we'll be more than happy to help. Thank you so much.
Cheers, guys.
Thank you. This has been the RocketPod podcast, delivered by Rocket CRM, the place for spot-on CRM advice delivered in a simple to understand format, as Rocket CRM makes CRM simple. The show was produced by the team at Rocket CRM and Thumbs Up Marketing, with special thanks to Alex Tilbrook, Design and Illustration, and MD Hammond. For information on Rocket CRM, visit rocketcrm.co.uk, and you can also follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn. Twitter's @RocketCRMUK and LinkedIn @Rocket-CRM. Thanks for listening.